Welcome back. So in this lesson, we're going to start by making a new file and actually filling it with some HTML and open it in our browser. And we're also going to learn about the underlying structure of every HTML document. So there's a few things that every HTML document always has, kind of a boilerplate that we're going to learn about. So to start, let's start by opening our Sublime Text, and we're going to open a new file by going to File and New. And let me go and save this file and give it a name, so we can go to File, Save, or Command S if you're using a Mac, or Control S for Windows. So once I do that, we're going to give it a name. So let's call it webpage.html. And this part is very important, .html. So I'll hit Save, and that .html will tell Sublime Text that, hey, when I open it in Chrome, it tells Chrome to treat this file as a HTML document. So we can write some HTML in here. So we'll start by using h1 tag. Now don't worry too much about what this tag is right now. We'll talk more about this tag further on in this course. So we'll use the h1 tag and fill this with some text saying my first tag and save the file. Now what we want to do is actually open the file and view it. Now remember, HTML is just text, but a browser interprets it and turns it into something like this or something like this. So to actually get Chrome to open it, double click on the file and it will open it in your default browser. So if Chrome is not your default browser, it will open it in whatever browser you have as your default, be it Firefox, Safari, Edge, or even Internet Explorer. And now you can see that though it's open, it's not showing me the actual HTML. It is taking the HTML, underline it, and turning it into a nice visual representation. As always, I can view my page source, and that's just one tag, so definitely simpler than something like this. But underline, they're the exact same thing, and this page probably has an H1 somewhere in there as well. So unfortunately, I have to break the news that this simple HTML that we've written so far is actually incorrect. Now, the HTML tag itself is fine, but this isn't a valid document. And that's because we're missing the underlying structure that every page needs to have. And it looks something like this. Now, I know that this is a lot to take in compared to what we've done so far, but I have two good news. Now, the first one is this code is always the same. It will never change no matter what you're doing. And the second good news is Sublime Text has a nice shortcut that will give you this structure very, very quickly with just 4 letters. And we're going to show you how this is done. We're going to go over these tags individually, and I'm going to show you how to get started by getting this code in Sublime. So in Sublime Text inside an HTML file, we're just going to type the word HTML and hit tab, and we automatically get this structure. So let's just go over what this does. First, let's save the file. So there's this Doctype HTML up top, and it's kind of weird because there isn't a corresponding closing Doctype like there is one for HTML and head, title, and body. Doctype is simply on its own. So let's go to MDM, just showing you how you would get there. I'll type MDN and then Doctype. So on here, let's take a look at what it says. It says the Doctype for HTML5 is very simple. To indicate that your HTML content uses HTML5, simply use a less than sign with an exclamation in front, Doctype space HTML, and we're going to follow that up with a greater than sign. Now we'll talk about what HTML5 is and what it isn't in a future video, but for now we do want to use it because it's basically the newest version of HTML5, so we put this at the top. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the HTML element. So we'll type MDN, HTML element. And this tells us that the HTML root element represents the root of an HTML document. All elements must be descendants of this element. So it is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, everything that we write needs to go inside of the HTML element, and more importantly, under permitted content, it tells us one head element followed by one body, which is what we have with one head here and a body here. So let's take a look at what head is. Now, the head element provides general information, also known as metadata, about the document. Now, this normally includes the title and links to or definitions of our scripts and style sheets. So what this means is basically everything that we don't see on the page as a user, so things like font files, style sheet files, or JavaScript files, all those things, they go in the head. And then the body is where we put all our content. So if we take a look at the body represents the content of the HTML document. So if we go back here, I'm going to show you one more thing, which is how to write comments in HTML. Now, if I want to write a note to myself and I just wrote content goes in the body, and up here I wrote metadata goes in head. Unfortunately, that won't work because this will show up on the page. HTML will treat this like text, and I want it to be a note to myself. So you can turn this into a comment by adding a less than sign followed by an exclamation with 2 dashes and your comment there. And then on the other side, you follow that up with 2 dashes and a greater than sign. So you can type it here yourself. You can type it manually. And you can see it goes gray in Sublime. But another really nifty shortcut is that you can go to the line you wish to comment out and just hit Command / if you're on a Mac, or Control / if you're on Windows. And you can see that it also did the same thing. Now, if you're not going to remember the shortcut, you can also do this the long way by going up here to Edit. You can go to Comment and toggle Comment. So in case you forget this and you don't want to write it out, you can always use this command here. Now, check this out. If we have a bunch of things also, we can just highlight it all and do the same thing, Control / and it will comment everything out. Great. So I'm going to keep these comments here. That's just notes to myself. Content goes here. So if we're following our notes, our content here needs to go inside our body. So we should have nothing floating around outside the HTML element except for the Doctype. Everything else goes inside the head or the body. So let's go ahead and open this up to make sure that it looks the same as it did before. So let's just double click. And it looks identical, so let's view the page source. And it looks the same. Notice that our comments are not showing up, of course, only the content within our H1 tag. One thing that we're missing while we're here is a title. Now, a title is important not because it shows up in our page. It will not show up in our actual page. Remember, it is in the head, so it's metadata. And what this does is 2 things. One, it determines the name or the text that goes in our tab up here. And it's also important for search engines. Let's take this for example. When you go to Google and you search for MDM and you see these names, these comes from the title elements. So for example, take the first one on the page that you see that says Mozilla Developer Network. So if you click on it, you will see that in the tab, the text there you see is the same as what you saw on the search results on Google. So this is why the title is very important when you're building your websites. So for this one here, we're going to give it the title, My First Page, and refresh. And watch how it updates it here. So now our page has a title.